Sci-fi horror is one of my favorite genres, likely because I saw Alien as a kid, and who doesn't love Sigourney Weaver as Ellen Ripley?
Mhm.
Hi, my name is Dakota. I try and post an interview every week with someone in the book world. If you like this, please consider subscribing. Today's interview is with David Wellington, who I spoke with 3 years ago about Paradise One, and I'm super excited to chat with him about the final book of the trilogy, Erebus 13. Thank you so much for chatting with me again.
Thank you so much, Dakota. I'm happy to be here.
So for folks who don't yet know uh what the Red Space trilogy is, do you have an elevator pitch?
It's kind of a tricky one because there's so many twists in the series, and I don't, I hate spoiling anything. But basically, there's a colony planet called Paradise One, and it stops communicating with Earth, like they would lose contact with it. So the authorities back on Earth send a spaceship to go check out this planet, and the spaceship goes no contact. And so they send another spaceship. And by the time the first book starts, Paradise One, our heroes who have been chosen very carefully for this mission to go make contact with this planet don't know any of this. And what they do know is that they have all messed up pretty badly. They're not in good graces with the authorities. And so they kind of wonder why this ship full of losers is being sent to this on this very important mission. And they quickly enough find out that they're completely expendable. Although even that might be a twist. So yeah, it's basically there is an alien species that existed a billion years ago, and they have designs on this planet. And that's really all I can say. Like even that is a huge spoiler. So, but
It,
we're 3 books in at this point.
it's so difficult to talk about this because it is all twists and turns. Like every chapter is a new why, what?
I can say that for Erebus 13, the third book, we come back to Earth, and the crew of the Artemis is desperately trying to make it back in time before the aliens get to Earth first. So that's like the pitch for book three.
So I know in the first interview that I did with you, we also talked about this, but you mentioned then that the IP or the intellectual property, the story idea came from someone else. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So this was the brainchild of a number of people at Orbit Books, especially Orbit UK. James Long, my editor, was the principal on that, and he kind of came up with a rough outline for the story of all 3 books, and named the characters. And then we did a little back and forth on that and fleshed out kind of his ideas, and then I just wrote the books. So certainly it's a collaboration, but it's my name on the cover and I have the copyrights for these books. So yeah, it's mostly my work, but I could not have gotten here without James.
That's an interesting way to go about it. And I love that, the seed was planted and you got names and things, and then you kind of rolled with it, right?
Yeah, so this happens more than you might think that editors have ideas and they want to see them come to light. The most famous one is Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, which was some editor somewhere said, what if Jane Austen but zombies? And the author just took over that from there and ran with it, and now it's a huge deal. But yeah, it's everybody has ideas, and when you're working with an editor, it's always a collaborative experience, or it should be. And so ideas are always flowing both ways. I think that we like to think of books as being written by solitary authors and their little scriptoriums, toiling away in the midnight hour. But like anything, a good book is the product of many different hands. If you think about how many people work on a movie, right? and yet we talk about the director as if they were the one who had this solitary vision for the movie. A book is, it's certainly you're much more in communication with the solitary author with a book, but there are still plenty of people giving helpful hints and advice, and people reading the book, as first readers or as editors, and it's always going to be a collaborative process.
As someone who's read the end all the way through, were anybody was anybody on your team that was kind of like helping or like giving nudges, this way or that way? Were they surprised with where you went?
They gave me free rein on that. That was they knew it had to have an ending. It had to have a real ending, right? This is not a series. This is a
Yeah.
trilogy. And so the last page of this book is the end. Uh, any lingering questions or loose plot threads at the end are my fault. But I really wanted it to be a conclusive ending for each character. I wanted them to each have their individual end. I think one of my favorite endings for anything ever was the end of 6 Feet Under, this television show about a family of morticians. And the ending, the last episode, total spoiler for a show that came out 20 years ago. The last 10 minutes of the entire show just follows every character from the show up to the moment they die. And you get to see how each one dies. You don't see anything after that. You don't see, the families grieving or anything. You just see their death. And I thought that is the best way to end something ever, right? So I won't say who makes it through the trilogy and who doesn't, but each of the characters that people have come to love with Red Space does get a definitive ending, and one I think that is really satisfying for each character. I hope if I say so myself. But yeah, I didn't have to fight. They were the editors were very happy with me just having this conclusive ending. But I really wanted my readers to know that, I did have something very specific in mind here.
Um, it's really hard to talk about because I really don't want to spoil anything from, the end of one through all of three.
Right.
Um, but you have a pretty dislikable character who shows up, and I would be so annoyed writing her, I think.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah, no, oh, she was so much fun. The two of them actually, because there's two of them like quite
Yes.
and they're so similar and yet they come from completely different viewpoints. And no, it is always fun to write a character who can speak their mind, who is not afraid to tell people exactly what they think of that person.
I suppose it's like actors always wanting to play the villain because it's more fun.
Sure. Yeah, you get to chew the scenery more. Yeah.
Um, so there are some like higher political movings going on in the background of this space horror. And I find it interesting that you don't have time to talk about any of it, but um, there are parts where you do kind of delve, and it's like I always kind of want to know a little bit more about what's going on, somewhere else. Do you kind of have an idea of what's happening on the moon as you're writing, or like what's happening on, well, maybe not Ganymede, but the moon specifically?
Oh no, and Ganymede and Mars and Paradise and everywhere else. Yeah, no, the whole political situation was mapped out. Uh, er- there was so much stuff that didn't make it into the books, which is hard to believe because the first one is 180,000 words. The two and three are about 120,000. So it's a lot of words. You would think that I would have time to get into, the Trade Federation dispute with the Belters. No, no, there's no time for that. The horrors that are going on are a little more important. But yeah, there's a lot of world building that I did that didn't make it in. And that's just how it works. That's true for every book I've ever written. And everybody always says, "Oh, I want to know. I need to know. I need the more." the whole picture. I need the concordance, the synopsis of the political situation. No, no, you don't. It's not going to make this story any better, believe me. And like, yeah, I when I cut things out, I cut them for a reason.
I don't think you need to add anything to the books. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm always just kind of curious, what's going on. But you have so many horror elements here, right? You're focusing on how things look and how things sound and how the characters are feeling in these really tense moments. I don't think you have room to do much else.
No. That's the thing is the good horror, you really have to slow down. You really need to like just focus in on tiny, tiny little moments of action, just because that's where people are afraid, right? Yeah, sure, we were all afraid of the global political situation, but in our everyday, it doesn't really affect us that much. Whereas if there's a spider in your bathtub, and you only notice it at the end of your bath, that's fear, right? That's like actual like visceral fear. And so zooming in on these tiny little moments is what makes horror work. And that means that all the big picture stuff kind of has to get pushed to the side. And I make plenty of references to it. It's there in the book if people want to explore it more. I have a friend who is obsessed with these YouTube videos about the politics of Phantom Menace, the episode one of Star Wars. And I can't do it. It's just it gets so in the weeds. But all that was in there, and Lucas absolutely knew all those details when he made that movie. Yeah, and if people really want to like chart out the politics of the lunarists versus the orbital navy and so on in red space, more power to them.
I feel like so James S. A. Corey with the Expanse books, that's what they do with those,
Yeah.
is they give that space and then the horror almost falls off because you're not really thinking about action or like something's coming to get you.
Yeah, I think watching the television show, I didn't really feel there was a lot of horror. And like it was a lot of politics and it was a lot of you know, factional disputes. And I think it really works. Like I'm not saying that's a bad thing, right? It's for the expanse, I think that is absolutely what they're doing is they're writing the future history of the human race in the solar system. And that's a really fun project. It's a great show. I've read a bunch of the books. They are many and they are long. So I have not finished reading the whole series, but I've watched the whole show and loved it. I think it's fantastic. It was not what I wanted to do with this series, though,
Yeah, so I feel like if people think they want more politics, they should go hang out with the Expanse. Um,
or this YouTube channel about the Phantom Menace. Enjoy.
so we see the characters deteriorate like slowly. How you did a really good job with Jang's PTSD. How do you kind of keep these things moving without stopping the story?
It's tricky. I mean, there's a lot of continuity work. I have to really think about where he was going to be in book one versus book three. So he starts out profoundly disabled at the start of book one and lashing out at people and not able to form relationships. And he doesn't get better. That's the thing. He doesn't get cured of his PTSD. I did not want to do that. I think it's way too easy to have a story where somebody has like some special character moment and suddenly all their mental illness goes away. That doesn't happen. That's not real. So I wanted to show that he is still broken and damaged and maybe, will never be whole again at the end of book three, but he has learned to trust these very, very few people around him, these people that he have become his family. And so he can have real relationships with them in a way that he was just not capable of at the beginning of book one. And it was, yeah, I'm really proud of just like how I stuck to my guns on that. It would have been very easy to just make him turn into like the superhero by the end of book one. But I think I also I try to do him honor with where Petrova occasionally says to him, the great thing about you is when things get tough, you seem to actually get stronger. And she ends up relying on him in a way that she did not think she possibly could.
Which is impressive because Petrova doesn't rely on anyone.
Except, yeah, and to a lesser extent, Rapscallion,
I
and
think
Booker.
that was like really good character progression though. Like she's slowly building trust even though this happens very quick. Like the story's kind of quick, but
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, no, at the beginning, she sees these people as impediments. They're screw ups, and they sorry, don't know if I can swear. Uh, they've messed up, and they're at very low points in their lives, and she thinks, oh wow, I got stuck with the worst crew. It turns out that they're actually the best crew that she could have had. And the relationships she forms with them are what allow all of them to survive as long as they do.
So we're gonna go a little bit into spoiler territory for the end of book two. So if anybody's not read them, this is the time to leave. But her relationship with Ekaterina is so difficult.
Yeah, yeah. Parental relationships are sometimes hard. Yeah, no, it's her mother, but it's also the most powerful woman in the world, right? So it's absolutely I wanted to show just like how hard it would be to reckon with that. Like for Petrova, like every part of her life has been determined by this, and everyone has already made up their mind about who she is and what she's worth by the time they meet her because they know about her mom who was this evil sort of fascist tyrant, and then got deposed, right? And so now she's just in exile. So for Petrova, this is Alexandra Petrova, the daughter. This is it's a really hard place to start from. Everybody thinks of her as a nepo baby, but then her mom also failed, so she doesn't even get the benefit of being a nepo baby. She doesn't have the money or the fame, right? So it was really important to me that she had things to overcome that had nothing to do with the horrors that were going to be internal to her, and how she sees them as just such a hassle to deal with when she's just trying to stay alive, and her mom keeps coming back and making life harder for her. It's just, it doesn't end. And so yes, if we're gonna spoil things, woo woo woo, spoiler warning. Yes, so Katerina does die in book one, but then she comes back as a ghost because that can happen in these books. And she's the holographic ghost. She's a computer simulation of the woman that she was, um, who does not have any qualms about thinking that she is in fact the same person and is absolutely should be listened to in all things. And so she makes Petrova's life hell again. And she was such a powerful character in flashback in the first book.
Yeah.
Um, this is one of those things I did change from the original outline because she was supposed to just be dead. She was just
Oh.
supposed before they even got to Paradise One. But she was such a powerful character in flashbacks. I went to the editor and I was like, listen, I just want to bring her back. She's just too useful. She's she's too useful for making Petrova's life hell. So yeah, so we brought her back and gave her a whole new set of adventures.
She's so at the end of book two, she's attached to Rapscallion. And he's doing the soft or hard light projection for her. And it seems like he trusts her almost implicitly at the beginning of that. And I wonder, like, because Sam, I'm wondering if it's because he was so close with Sam.
I think it's also yes, and so for Rapscallion, these ghosts make more sense than the living humans do because they don't have these gross bodies to deal with, and they're just computer programs. And Rapscallion might be the only one who actually understands what's going on, that these people are actually dead. These are not the same people. Everybody treats them like they're the continuation of the live person, and they are not. And Rapscallion knows that. These are simulations at best, and they are very much You know, the funny thing for Rapscallion is they don't seem to understand that either, right? The ghosts don't seem to understand that they're dead. And for Rapscallion, it's the most logical thing in the world. Yeah, no, you're dead. You don't have to act like a human anymore. You can be more like like a robot, which, is the right way to be. And so he's always a little confused when they want to like pretend that they still have bodies.
It's very interesting because he's with her for most of the book, I guess. And his relationship with her changes because of who she is. And that's
Yeah.
such an interesting thing because he is a robot, and logically, he should have been able to deduce based on past behaviors.
But again, human personalities are a complete mystery to him at the beginning of the story, and they're not that much clearer to him at the end. He's a robot, and he does not understand why these people are always so afraid that their bodies might get hurt because you can just make a new one. He doesn't understand like, oh, your consciousness is in danger. Well, why don't you just copy it to a different computer? One of my favorite things is whenever he's talking to them and he's like, well, the worst thing that can happen is that all of you die, but I won't. I'll still be here floating around in empty space and, waiting for my power to run down. But I have solar cells, so I can charge back up.
Um, he so through part of the first part of the third book, he's looking for energy on Earth, and Petrova says something like, "Well, you're gonna kill me if you run low on power. You'll just cut that off, and that's one of the first things." And he's like, "That's not killing you."
Right. Just putting you in standby mode. Yeah.
So it feels like a lot of these books is dealing with what is death, because now you have revenants, you have ghosts who think they're real.
Yeah, I think that in the first book we're so worried about like the physical bodies dying and who's not going to make it and because of events in that first book, that stops being the ultimate threat. And that's a tricky thing for a horror writer. This was one of the bits of the outline that I struggled with because the people kept coming back. And I was like, well, how do you make it scary for them if they don't, like, if they always just have another chance? Like they respawn, right? And that is like video game characters. And I was like, how do you make it scary for them? And the answer is, well, the universe around them is going to change materially in such a way that living forever is not as exciting as it sounds. That you don't want to live forever in this universe if things shake out the way that they're intended to. So that was a lot of it. And once I started exploring that, I was like, I just wanted to have fun with it. So it was like, okay, right, but what if you had a body that was constantly being healed, but it was also being changed, so that every time you got hurt, you were a little less human? Would that make you not want to get hurt, or would you throw yourself into this to see what the changes to come would be? And for Petrova, it's a fascinating journey because she doesn't know what she's eventually going to become. She knows that she's changing, uh, and in really kind of scary ways. And so I really wanted to make this thing that heals her, this medical device that makes her whole again, is the most terrifying thing in the book.
The opening sequence with her coming out of cryosleep is horrifying. Like the visual imagery of bones floating, like this is horrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, and I repeated it in this one. So I took the bit from book one and basically popped it into book three almost unchanged, and then she realizes she's dreaming of what happened the first time. And then when her mom comes in and says, "Oh, you're fine. Wake up. It's time to get back to work." Like she's saying it's time for school, and I loved that. There's actually like another thing like that in book three, which is a huge Easter egg for people who would have read Monster Island, my very first published novel back in 2005. Um, there is a moment when she comes into New York City on a boat, and this is the opening sequence from Monster Island is coming into New York City on a boat. And I loved being able, it's not identical. Like I changed a bunch of it, but I went in and made it as close as I could to that scene from Monster Island. Just as if people have been reading my book since that, because I have a couple readers still who remember like Monster Island when it was a serial online back in 2003. So I really wanted to like, yeah, touch back into that. I've done that in a lot of my books where I have, say, a character just show up who shouldn't possibly be there, but they were in a previous book. Um, Back when I started doing that, I thought of it as like a multiverse thing, like that each book is a different parallel universe, but the same things kind of like happen over and over again. Having watched the way that multiverses have kind of evolved in popular fiction and popular entertainment, I'm not as crazy about calling it a multiverse thing anymore. So now it's just a literary homage.
I was wondering if like maybe you were gonna Stephen King this where, the, this one character just appears in the rest of your books forever.
No, that would be if I was going to do that, it would be Laura Caxton for my vampire books. And I
Right?
actually, yeah, I brought her back for my zombie book Positive. Um, and I always want to bring her back. I loved Laura. She was my favorite character to write of all time. In many ways, Petrova is like a far future version of Laura Caxton. But yeah, Laura and I had such a great time writing the vampire books.
I love that you talk about her as a real person.
She feels that way to me. She always has. So, spoilers for books that came out in the early 2000s, but so Laura Caxton is a state trooper in Pennsylvania who ends up fighting vampires, and she's gay. And she's a little bit modeled after my sister, who's gay, but not that much. I think what happened was I was writing the story, and there was a scene where she fights a vampire, and it doesn't go well. And then she goes home, and it's dark in her house, and she puts her gun away, and then she goes to get in bed, and she doesn't turn the light on because somebody else is in bed. And all these details are just kind of coming to me. And as she gets into bed, it's revealed that it's another woman, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. Well, Laura, thank you for sharing that with me. Because it really did feel like that when I was writing Laura. She was revealing herself to me, and she was a very guarded, quiet character in some ways. And so it really became this thing of getting to know her. And it does actually feel like she's a real person to me, not in some, way where I should be committed to care. But I think, you know, we lived together for 5 years, and the stories that I told with her, I put her through so much hell, but I ended up giving her a good ending. So yeah,
You were also with her the longest, right? The most books were with her.
5 books is the longest I've done.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Are
It's
you,
if you count positive, yeah.
oh, well, it's not quite the same.
Well, not quite the same character.
It is funny though that you bring up positive because the revenants are zombies, but everybody's like, they're not zombies.
Nope. Yep. And this is one of those things that the editors were really clear on. You are not to call them zombies. So I was a zombie guy for a long time, and the silly part is that it was a tradition when I started that you did not use the word zombie in a novel. And of course, all of the promotional material said Monster Island, a zombie novel, right from the start. But the word zombie does not appear in that novel. It does not appear, I don't think it appears in positive. Maybe it does. Anyway, the point is that stopped being a thing after a while. But when I started out, that was a tradition that if you wrote a zombie novel, you couldn't call them zombies. And I think this came from there was a time when making reference to things that happened in movies or like tropes of movies was just not done in fiction, in prose fiction. Like you wanted to distance yourself as much as possible from movies because that was the competition. And that's so no longer the case. Like there is such an incredible ecosystem of books turning into movies, and even vice versa, that I think it's not a thing anymore. But yeah, when I was much younger, I was not allowed to use the word zombies in my books. So there's a resonance with that. But this time it was just that they felt that zombie was not a science fiction word. It was
Oh.
it's a horror word from the 60s. And so, and even before that, of course. But uh, Revenant was sounded more science fiction-y. And I don't know if I totally agree with that, but there is a real difference, and I also want to make sure that you knew these were not the kind of zombies that eat brains. These are not the kind of zombies that, climb out of the cemetery going, send more paramedics. That's not what we're talking here. These are dead bodies that have been reanimated for a very specific purpose, and are under the control of an alien entity. So they are not zombies.
I do feel like this not zombies is kind of making a comeback now that they've done 28 years later and then the part two.
Mhm.
Do you think that's the case?
Absolutely. I think, we went through a huge zombie backlash for a long time,
Yeah.
which was a problem for me because I was the zombie guy, right? But no, I had done everything I wanted to do with movie style zombies by the time Positive was done. Um, but we went through this huge zombie backlash, and people just were so bored of zombies, and yet you still kept getting them over and over again because people could still make money off of them somehow. And so it just became a cliche. And I think every generation needs to rediscover these things. And so now, I'm old enough, and I am very old, that I have now lived through a cycle of this, a generational cycle of it. And I think that young readers today are ready for a zombie renaissance.
I get the feeling werewolves and maybe vampires are coming back in a strong way too.
Vampires never go away. I mean, the Vampire Lestat is like this huge show right now. There's always going to be something about vampires. Vampires are like the most resonant of those tropes. Of all the monsters, vampires are the ones that stick with us the most. I think because we end up meeting vampires all the time. It might just be your boss who wants you to work another shift, who just needs a little more of your time, just needs a little more of your productivity. But we all know this experience of having predators preying on us, and not being able, and who look exactly like us, but they want what we have, and they're not going to take a no for an answer. So I think vampires are always going to be around. I think zombies, for better or worse, it's just such a potent metaphor for the 21st century of just the way, and I don't mean this in like the NPC thing that you see on TikTok. I mean this in the way corporations see their customers, the way politicians see their constituents. Like the people in power think of us as NPCs, and we do not have meaningful lives to them. And so that metaphor is, or at least it feels that way. I know that real life is more complicated. I know that people are not as simple as that, even the rich people, even the powerful people, but it just feels so much like they will not listen to us, and they're not going to do what we want them to do because we don't matter to them on some level. And that's the pervasive dread of the 21st century. So I think zombies are going to be with us for quite a while. Werewolves, it's interesting because I feel like werewolves are the ones that are fading the fastest because our connection to the natural world is so tenuous now. Like most of us don't live in a place with a deep, dark forest that you could get lost in. Most of us do not meet wild animals on a daily basis. Most of us don't meet domesticated animals on a daily basis other than our pets. So the werewolf has always been about the terror that you are not as civilized as you think you are. You are not as above nature as you think you are. And so, I think there's still a lot of potent metaphor there, but like in terms of the sort of animal human imbalance, I think that's getting lost. And I think that the werewolf will, of course, make a comeback, but it'll be in a very different form. And I'm really interested in seeing what somebody manages to do with that. I think the maybe something about toxic masculinity. I think that could be a really powerful story. I'm not even joking. I think that you could make a really good werewolf story about toxic masculinity and how men choose, to become dangerous. Um, because I think that is something going on that I think is a potent vein for horror to explore.
So I think how easily people are manipulated without understanding that they're being manipulated is really interesting, especially in horror. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Because you can't write an AI story anymore. AI has become real. It has become part of our lives. And so it used to be that AI was the Frankenstein monster. It was the creation that exceeds the creator or that terrifies the creator, right? And now AI is this thing that lives on your computer and does your homework for you, apparently. It's and so where's the terror in that, right? If it's chirpy and fun and wants to help, it wants to help so much. And that can be incredibly terrifying in the right hands, but it's too obvious a metaphor in some ways. So I think AI is going to go through a major change in terms of fiction. And I don't know it won't be called AI. Like there are going to be stories about AI. Everybody will know that they're really about AI, but they won't be called AI because that's the way horror tropes work best is when they're just a little bit over there. Like there's a little bit of distance and you can pretend that you're talking about, a monster instead of creeping student loan debt.
It's it's very similar to sci-fi using like talking about political things and structures and ideas and movements. So yeah.
Yeah, in my books, I've always tried to like throw in a little bit of that. And I worry I get too heavy-handed with it. Like in my first zombie books, the US government does not know how to handle the zombie outbreak and absolutely drops the ball. And there's a lot in those early books, unfortunately, of bureaucrats and politicians talking about, well, how does this affect the midterms that the dead have come back and are eating the living? Um, which I think I meant it as satire at the time. I don't think it's all that funny anymore. So yeah, and the politics in Red Space are a little removed from what we have today, although maybe not that much.
I think it depends on how you look at things, but um I'm interested in if you're going to keep going with sci-fi horror in the future or if you're kind of gonna veer away from it.
So nothing's determined yet. Nothing is like no contracts are signed. There's nothing to report. I'm absolutely interested in writing more space horror. It will not be more Red Space. That's done. It will not be a sequel to The Last Astronaut, although I love that book. I think it ends where it should end as a standalone. So what else is out there, right? So I've got a lot of ideas, but nothing has really gelled yet. I think I really do want to write a story about something like AI, although it's going to be some kind of monster. But how that works into cosmic horror, I don't know. So we'll figure that out.
You have some time. This book just came out today.
Well, sure, but I like to keep busy.
Um, so you're not actively working on anything right now. Um, but can people still find any updates in the future on like your website or anything?
So right now, probably Instagram is the best place. I'm David Wellington, author at Instagram. I'm also on Blue Sky, but nobody's looking at Blue Sky these days, unfortunately.
It, the social media stuff is changing too much. So if I just stick to one thing that has dog and cat pictures interspersed.
No, no, it's Instagram. I think Instagram is winning. I think Twitter is not worth visiting anymore, and I think hot take, but yeah, I don't think Twitter should survive, honestly, and I don't think it will. I don't know about Threads. Threads is kind of new. Uh, yeah, I don't use Facebook anymore. I haven't in a long time, so Instagram is really the place to find me.
Do you have a local bookshop where folks can order signed books?
No, I don't have anything set up like that. There are a number of bookstores near me that I love. There's the Twisted Spine in New York City is always great. The Story Bookshop, yeah, we've got a lot of great bookstores here in New York, but at the moment, yeah, if people want to know about signed books, well, maybe somebody's going to have some book plates.
Yeah, so you are sending me some book plates from my local bookstore, um, in Marquette, Michigan, though. So it's a very small community.
Okay. Well, anybody in Marquette, Michigan who wants a signed book, they know how to get it then.
It's funny because the bookshop that I do this with had signed Andy Weir books. So
Hmm,
like they must have purchased them from some mass signing. Um,
sure. It's not hard to get signed books if you ask. I have a website, davidwellington.net. You can contact me there. If anybody needs a signed book, just let me know. We'll figure something out.
the book is already out right now, so if anybody out there who hasn't picked up a copy wants a copy, go get it. It's probably at your local library too if you can't afford a copy right now. And thank you again, David, for joining me.
Everybody go to Marquette, Michigan, get your copy now.
It is very lovely with the Lake Superior, so
Oh,
good
nice.
time.
I can check this out. Well, Dakota, thank you so much for this. This is really fun.
And if you've enjoyed this conversation, maybe come back next week. I am speaking with Grace Vale about her debut novel, Mostly Human Resources. It's a funny, cryptid book.
Sounds great.
Well, thank you again, and I hope everybody has a lovely, lovely day.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.